Hi, everybody. Ellen from V2. We are a teen program in North Georgia, and I'm coming to you from our mindfulness room. I am going to do a little bit of a different thing from our regular videos. So I am going to do a little game with you today. But first, we need to talk about mindfulness. So mindfulness, and there's a lot of definitions of mindfulness. One of the definitions folks use is paying attention on purpose to the present moment, non-judgmentally, okay? And that makes sense, but to some folks, it still seems kind of fuzzy. So when you think of being mindful of something, you might be mindful of the uneven sidewalk, or I'm mindful of my words around small children, or I'm mindful of how much spice I add to the food. What does that mean? What do you think being mindful of something means in that case? Well, might mean aware. I'm aware of what I'm doing. I'm aware of how much spice I'm adding. I'm aware of, choosing words carefully in front of small children, or I'm aware of the uneven sidewalk so that I don't trip and fall. The opposite of being mindful of something would be being mindless. Like you're doing something mindlessly. How many of us have done something mindlessly? Me, all the time, right? I practice mindfulness regularly and I still find myself being mindless about stuff. I use this example all the time where I say, especially those of you who drive, if you are driving home, or you have to be driving, you just be doing your regular commute home. Have you ever done the thing where you go on absolute autopilot and then you suddenly are back at your house and you're like, I don't even remember getting here. I don't remember the drive or the commute back. I was just in my head somewhere else, zoned out. That's being pretty mindless. And in that case, especially if you're driving, it can be kind of dangerous to be checked out totally and have your mind be elsewhere. You're not being very mindful of what you're doing in the present moment. If you're being mindful as you were driving home, well, you would be attending to what you're doing in the present moment. You would be thinking about your driving and being aware. Instead, when you're checked out, you're somewhere else. So when you're being mindful, you're there in the present moment. When you're being mindless, it's usually because you're somewhere else. You're not in the present moment. Your mind is occupied elsewhere. So the game we're going to play is mindful or mindless, or mindful or unmindful, however you want to say it. So I'm going to give you a scenario. Obviously, I don't know what your answer is because you're watching this later. We're not live with each other right now. So it's going to be honor system. You just have to keep track on your own, okay? I have some statements here. I want to see if you think this situation is mindful or mindless. Practice round. Leaving your jacket on the floor after coming in from outside. Mindful or mindless? This one is mindless because you're kind of just tossing it there. It becomes a problem later. It could become a problem if someone trips over it, or if it's a jacket that's special to you and then the dog walks on it and leaves tracks, or it becomes dirty for other reasons. Again, it becomes lost because it becomes shoved under the couch and we forget it's there. That's mindless. So you get how I'm saying, like it's a scenario, mindful or mindless. All right, now we're playing for real. Noticing a butterfly, mindful or mindless? That one is mindful. Anytime you are noticing or you are aware of something, you're being mindful of it, especially if it's happening right then. So we're noticing a butterfly right then, we're being mindful. Next, scrolling through your phone during class or during a lecture or during a workshop. Scrolling the phone, mindful or mindless? This one I have people argue with me about, and they're like, oh, but I'm being mindful because this one's mindless. I'm being mindful because I'm noticing right now what's happening on the phone. I disagree, because, and I've heard this said by someone else who's a mindfulness practitioner, that the phone itself is an escape from what's happening around you. This, when you're looking at it, is taking you out of what's happening right then. And that's usually not the only thing that's going on. It can be, like, if you are, relaxing at the end of the day, you don't feel like doing anything else, you just want to scroll, there's time for that. But if you're in class or you're in a workshop, you're not attending to what's happening right then. You're attending to this, basically saying, I don't want to be present for this right now, so I'm going to be present for this right now. So I do think it's mindless because you're not attending to what's actually going on, especially if you're a student and you're supposed to be noticing what's happening in class and retaining the information, but you're doing this instead. Then that is an example of being mindless about what's happening, because that's what happens when folks come back and go, I don't understand this chapter, or I don't understand that lesson. Well, what were you doing? You were not mindfully attending the lesson. You were on your phone or your device. So that's an example. I think there's a time and place where that could be the only thing available, but it depends on what's going on around you. If you're supposed to be attending to something else, but you're choosing to do this instead, I think it's a mindless activity. Next. Hey, what happened to the rest of my French fries? How many of us have done that before, where you're eating food and then all of a sudden you're like, where'd all the rest of my chicken nuggets go? Or what happened to my French fries? Anybody ever done that? Usually it's because we have been eating mindlessly. We are not attending to how many there are. We're not eating mindfully. Mindful eating is one of my favorite aspects of mindfulness, because you can really savor the flavor of it. You can contemplate, the richness of the food, where it came from, who might have prepared it. All of that is just a beautiful exercise in eating mindfully, considering the journey the food took to get to us, the actual sensory experience of eating the food, versus eating, and then you're like, am I out of French fries already? That's kind of mindless, right? You're not being aware of the food, you're not being aware of what you're eating. You're just eating to eat. I also understand there are moments where we just can't resist and we've got to eat it right then. I get that. But that whole thing of like, did I already eat all my French fries? Well, if we're being mindful, we would be aware of eating all those French fries, right? So that's a mindless one. Giving your pet some scratches and noticing how soft and warm they feel. Mindful or mindless? That's being mindful. You're using your senses and you're connecting with another being in the present moment. So when we're giving our pets some scratches and we're feeling the warmth of them and the softness, all of that sensory engagement, that's that connection with the animal that feels so good. That's being in the moment. You're present for that interaction and you're being present for your pet. So that is mindful for sure. Catching yourself right before you interrupt somebody. Anybody ever thought about that, where you got something to say and you're like, and you get excited and you want to say it, it's on the tip of your tongue, but then you don't say it? Mindful or mindless? What do you think? Mindful. You were aware that you were about to interrupt. That's considering someone outside of yourself in that moment, right? So that's being aware of the choices that we make and the feelings that are involved and what we're doing. Being mindless about others is just blurting out and speaking over someone and being interrupting. We all make that mistake. But when you are aware of it, you catch yourself and you wait until a more appropriate time to say what you need to say, because you should still say what you need to say. But instead of talking over or interjecting or interrupting, being aware that it's not quite your turn yet, that's being mindful. How are you doing? You getting them all right? Sure you are. Multitasking. Mindful or mindless? What do you think? Multitasking is a type of mindlessness, because if you're fully attending to what you're doing, you can't do anything else. If you're fully attending to cooking your dinner, then you can't also be fully attending to the conversation you're having on the phone, right? There's a level of distractedness that happens with both, okay? Just fact. Could you do both at the same time? Sure. But are you 100% with the food and 100% with the conversation? No. You kind of are back and forthing it, or you're splitting your attention. You can't give it all the time. That is a form of mindfulness. Mindfulness would be to do the activity on its own to attend to cooking the food. When you finish cooking the food, fully eating the food, and then moving on to having that conversation and being able to pay attention fully to your friend that you're talking to instead of trying to do multiple things at once. Again, I understand there's not enough time in the day. We must multitask. Just know that that does prohibit us from being fully in any of those activities that we're doing simultaneously. Next, trying a new food, mindful or mindless. That is mindful. Because if you're trying new food, and let's say you're fully in it, you're being mindful. You're experiencing something. You're using your senses to engage in the present moment. You're being mindful. Next, feeling the warm water from a hot shower. How many of you guys love a hot bath or a hot shower? One of my favorite self-care activities is just to have a hot shower, especially after a really hard day. Just something about that feels really nice. And noticing how good that feels, that's mindful to be able to sit and go, because again, using the senses, you're paying attention to what's happening on purpose. A mindless shower would be stepping out of the shower and going, did I wash the conditioner out of my hair? Wait, I don't remember any of that. That would be mindless. Mindful is paying attention to what's happening. You're engaged in the moment. Can we be mindful all the time? Boy, that would be nice. But I feel like it's really hard. So cut yourself some slack if you feel like I can't do that all the time. That would be exhausting. I feel you, and I'm the same way. But it's something we can aspire to do when we need to. And it makes our brains feel very good when we do. All right. Noticing that your body feels a little tired and hungry. Mindful or mindless? This one is mindful. Again, anytime we're noticing something that's happening right now, we're being mindful. And to reflect on where we are, what our physical needs are, that's mindful. That's so good to sit there and go, oh, I'm tired and hungry. Just knowing that is going to help your interactions. Because then if you feel like you're getting a little snappy with somebody, or if you feel like you're on edge, you have the self-awareness to go, oh, because I'm tired and hungry. Being able to express that to somebody else. Hey, I'm sorry if I'm a little off. I'm really tired. Or I'm sorry if I'm a little off. I really need to find something to eat. I'm feeling very hungry and it's affecting my mood. Similarly, being aware of your emotions is also very mindful. Okay. Leaving the stove on after cooking. For how many of us is that like a nightmare scenario where we're like, did I turn the stove off? Did I lock the door? Everybody's been there where you're like, did I forget that? It just makes us feel really overwhelmed. So, mindful or mindless to leave the stove on after cooking? What do you think? Leaving the stove on after cooking is mindless and dangerous. We have to think and be mindfully aware that we're turning it off, okay? And this is, I know some people really struggle with this. Like, this is something different than feeling like you can't let go of those thoughts. This is just casually forgetting to turn off. And that's where we need to be more mindful so that we can keep ourselves safe. Getting up from class and thinking, I have no idea what the teacher just taught us today because of whatever. Who's been there before? Me. Is that mindful or mindless? I have no idea what we just learned in class today. Mindful or mindless? Yeah, it's pretty mindless, right? That's not to say that every time your teacher teaches, it's going to be incredibly inspiring and exciting and relevant. Because sometimes we've all been there. The lessons are like, ooh, not the most exciting content we've ever learned. However, we should at least be aware of what was being taught, even if it's not that exciting. You should at least know, oh, yeah, we were going over that chapter again, or we were reviewing the study guide, or we were watching a video, whatever it is. You should at least be able to say, this is what we did today. But if you have no idea, well, then where were you brain-wise? Daydreaming, thinking about, an interaction that you had, coming up with a story. I've been there. I spent so many creative hours during class when I should have probably been paying attention, right? And that's fun. It's fun to doodle and let our brains go wandering, but that's not mindful because we're not being aware of what's happening in the moment. Noticing that a friend is looking sad. mindful or mindless? That's mindful. Again, you're noticing, and you're noticing it right then. And it's about something outside of ourselves. We're noticing a friend is looking sad. Then we can go and have compassion, give that person some space, or engage with them. Hey, you're looking a little bit down. How can I help? You doing okay? All of that stuff is mindful. We're mindful of others, then we can be better friends instead of mindlessly wandering about our day, right? Enjoying each M&M from the bag. Mindful or mindless? You're getting it out and you're like, ooh, I love M&Ms. And you're eating, you're like, oh, it tastes so good. And then you take another one out and you're like, oh, yes. And you taste it, you're like, oh, exactly what I needed today. Mindful or mindless? Mindful, because you are aware and you're using your senses to engage in the present moment. Wait, I can be mindful with candy? Yes, you can. Last one, laughing until crying with friends. Like you're laughing so hard you're crying. Who's been there where you laugh so hard your stomach hurts and you're crying, you can't breathe with your friends? Mindful or mindless? That's mindful. Being with your friends, fully present, instead of sitting and scrolling nearby, laughing and talking and enjoying each other's company and engaging in that way. That's being mindful. When we have mindful interactions, it enriches our life so much to be with someone meaningfully instead of just parallel existing next to somebody. So, how did you do? Let me know in the comments. If you disagree with one that I put out, I'd love to hear that too. So, thank you so much for watching this, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Take care.